My wife always said, "You're too sensitive, learn to take a joke," when she insulted me publicly again and again. So I started joking back about her cooking, her driving, her career. When she got upset, I said, "Too sensitive. Learn to take a joke." The day she realized she'd created a monster. Look, I'm not saying my marriage was doomed from the start, but if red flags were currency, I could have bought a Ferrari and still had enough left over for gas. My wife Sabrina had this thing, this twisted belief that sarcasm wasn't just a defense mechanism or a cheap way to get laughs. No, she genuinely thought it was a personality trait, like having brown eyes or being left-handed. Except brown eyes don't make you want to crawl under a rock and die. Picture this. We're at the Hendersons' housewarming party, right? Nice suburban folks, decent wine, the whole 9 yards. I'm actually feeling pretty good about myself. Wore my lucky blue tie, managed to parallel park without curbing the wheels, even brought a halfway decent bottle of Cabernet that didn't come from the gas station. I'm thinking, maybe tonight I won't embarrass myself. Wrong move, Marcus. Never tempt fate like that. So we walk in, and within 15 seconds, 15, Sabrina's already sizing up the room like a shark smelling blood in the water. She spots the Hendersons' friends clustered around the kitchen island, and I can practically see the gears turning in her head. That little smile she gets when she's about to go for the jugular? Yeah, there it was. "Oh, everyone," she announces, grabbing my arm like I'm some kind of show-and-tell prop. "This is my husband, Marcus. He's in accounting." Pause for dramatic effect. Exciting, right? Cue the polite chuckles. But she's not done. Oh no, she's just warming up. His greatest talent is making spreadsheets about more spreadsheets. I swear, last week he spent 3 hours color-coding our grocery budget by food groups. The room erupts. People are slapping their knees like she just delivered the punchline of the century. And there's Lydia, Sabrina's best friend since college, practically howling like a hyena who just heard the world's funniest joke. I'm talking full-body convulsions, tears streaming down her face, the works. If laughter could summon emergency services, the paramedics would have been knocking down the door. Meanwhile, I'm standing there with this frozen smile plastered on my face, nodding along like a bobblehead doll. You know that feeling when you're watching a horror movie and the main character is about to walk into the obviously haunted basement? That's me at every party, watching my dignity get murdered in real time while everyone else cheers. Inside, though, I'm shrinking. It's like someone took a pin to my ego and just started letting all the air out, slow and steady. Here I am, 32 years old, decent job, pay my taxes, remember anniversaries, and I'm getting roasted harder than a Thanksgiving turkey in front of people I barely know. The worst part? They're eating it up. Mrs. Henderson actually asks me if I have any tips for organizing her recipe cards. Because apparently, being married to Sabrina automatically makes me the household organization guru. The night drags on, and every conversation somehow circles back to my quirky habits. Did you know I alphabetized my books? Hilarious. What about how I actually read the instruction manuals for electronics? Comedy gold. Oh, and get this. I keep a small notebook in my car to track gas mileage. Stop the presses. We've got ourselves a regular Jerry Seinfeld over here. By the time we're driving home, I'm feeling about 2 inches tall. The streetlights are blurring past, and I can't shake the image of all those faces laughing at me. Not with me, at me. There's a difference, and trust me, you know it when you're on the receiving end. That was fun tonight, Sabrina says, scrolling through her phone like nothing happened. Did you see how hard Lydia was laughing? She said I should do stand-up. And that's when I make my first mistake. I decide to actually communicate like a grown-up in a healthy relationship. Revolutionary concept, I know. Sabrina, I say, keeping my eyes on the road because I'm a responsible driver even when my world's falling apart. That stuff you said back there. It kind of stung. She looks up from her phone like I just told her the earth was flat. What stuff? The spreadsheet jokes. The whole introduction. It made me feel. I pause, searching for the right words that won't make me sound like a complete wimp. Small. It made me feel small. The silence stretches between us like a chasm. I'm thinking maybe she'll apologize. Maybe we'll have one of those relationship breakthrough moments where we both grow as people and learn to communicate better. Maybe pigs will fly and I'll win the lottery while getting struck by lightning. Instead, she rolls her eyes so hard I'm surprised they don't pop out and roll under the seat. God, Marcus, you're too sensitive. Learn to take a joke. And there it is. The phrase that would become the soundtrack to the slow death of my self-esteem. Learn to take a joke. Like it's some kind of life skill I missed in school, right between algebra and social studies. How to let your wife publicly mock you 101. It's not about being sensitive. I try to explain. It's about respect. Nobody likes the boring, sensitive guy at a party, Marcus. I'm just trying to help you be more interesting. Help me be more interesting. By making me the punchline. By turning my completely normal, perfectly adequate personality traits into comedic ammunition. Because apparently, having a steady job and being organized is the kind of character flaw that needs to be highlighted for public entertainment. That night, lying in bed while Sabrina scrolls through Instagram next to me, I stare at the ceiling and have one of those moments of clarity that hits you like a freight train. I'm not her husband. I'm her material. I'm the setup to her punchlines, the straight man in her comedy routine, the reliable source of content whenever she needs to get a laugh. Learn to take a joke, she'd said. But here's the thing about jokes. They're supposed to be funny for everyone involved, not just the person telling them. And I haven't been laughing for a long, long time. I turn over and close my eyes, but sleep doesn't come easy. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, a tiny voice is starting to whisper something dangerous. Something that sounds a lot like, two can play this game. But that's a story for another day. Tonight, I'm just Marcus the accountant, Marcus the spreadsheet guy, Marcus the walking punchline. Tomorrow? Well, tomorrow might be different. You'd think after the Hendersons' party, Sabrina might have gotten the memo about my feelings. You'd think wrong. Dead wrong. Because apparently, my wife took my little heart-to-heart as a challenge rather than, actual human communication. It was like I'd just told a stand-up comedian their material was stale. They don't retire, they double down. 3 weeks later, we're getting ready for her cousin Jessica's engagement party. Now, I actually like Jessica. She's one of those rare family members who doesn't make you want to fake your own death just to avoid holiday gatherings. Sweet girl, marrying a decent guy named Trevor who works in IT and actually gets my spreadsheet jokes without needing them explained like I'm speaking ancient Sumerian. I'm in the bedroom, trying to decide between shirts because apparently that's where my life peaked. Shirt selection anxiety. I finally settle on this navy button-down that I genuinely like. It fits well, doesn't make me look like I raided a teenager's closet, and the color brings out my eyes. Or so my mom told me once, bless her heart. I'm feeling pretty good about myself, which should have been red flag number 1. Confidence and Marcus don't mix well in public settings. We arrive at the country club, and the place is packed. Jessica went all out, fairy lights, open bar, the whole Pinterest dream wedding vibe. I spot Trevor's parents, some college friends, and about 50 other people I vaguely recognize from various family functions where I've been introduced as Sabrina's husband, the accountant. Because God forbid anyone remember my actual name. Everything's going smoothly at first. I'm making small talk with Trevor's dad about the Rams' chances this season, nursing a beer, basically flying under the radar like a social stealth bomber. Then Trevor's best man starts telling stories about their college days, and people are laughing, clapping, having a grand time. It's actually nice, wholesome family fun without anyone getting roasted. That's when I notice Sabrina eyeing the crowd like a predator sizing up her prey. She's got that look again, the one that means someone's about to become tonight's entertainment, and spoiler alert, it's probably going to be me. She excuses herself from her conversation with Jessica's bridesmaids and starts making her way toward the center of the room. "Excuse me, everyone," she calls out, grabbing a champagne flute and tapping it with her engagement ring. The musical ping 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 cuts through the chatter like a dinner bell from hell. "Can I have your attention for just a second?" My stomach drops into my shoes. This is it. This is how I die. Not from some tragic accident or noble sacrifice, but from public humiliation at a family gathering. I'm standing there frozen like a deer in headlights, watching my wife turn into a one-woman roast show with me as the guest of honor. "I just wanted everyone to get a good look at my husband Marcus," she announces, gesturing toward me like I'm a prize on a game show. "Doesn't he look like he's here to help you set up your Wi-Fi?" The laughter starts immediately. Not the polite, awkward chuckles from the Hendersons' party. We're talking full-blown, belly-shaking laughter. Someone near the bar actually snorts champagne. "Seriously, folks," Sabrina continues, clearly encouraged by the response. "Ask him about routers. He probably has opinions about Ethernet cables that'll blow your mind." And wouldn't you know it, Trevor's cousin Derek, A guy who probably thinks IP address is a fancy way to say street number actually walks over with a huge grin on his face. "Hey man," he says, slapping me on the shoulder like we're old buddies. "You work for Geek Squad or something? My internet's been acting up, and my wife's about to lose it with her work-from-home situation." I force a laugh that sounds like a deflating balloon. "No, I'm actually in accounting. Just regular boring accounting." "Oh, come on," Derek pushes. "You've got to know something about computers, right? All you number guys are tech wizards." Meanwhile, Sabrina's basking in the attention like a cat in a sunbeam. She's moved on to telling Jessica's college roommate about how I organized our closet by season and color. "He has a system for everything," she's saying. "I swear, if you gave him a label maker, he'd probably organize the spice rack alphabetically." The worst part? That's not even an insult. That's just good household management. But the way she says it, you'd think I was collecting toenail clippings or something equally disturbing. The party drags on, and every conversation somehow circles back to my apparent tech expertise or organizational quirks. Jessica's aunt wants to know if I can recommend a good antivirus software. Trevor's groomsman asks if I've ever built a PC from scratch. Someone's grandmother corners me by the dessert table to ask about backing up photos to the cloud. By the time we're in the car heading home, I feel like I've been put through a social blender. The navy shirt that I felt so good about earlier is now sticking to my back with nervous sweat, and my jaw hurts from maintaining that fake smile for 3 straight hours. That was humiliating, I finally say, because apparently I'm a glutton for punishment and haven't learned my lesson about expecting empathy from my wife. Sabrina snorts, actually snorts, like I just told her the funniest joke she's ever heard. "You're being dramatic, Marcus. Everyone was laughing. People love you." "They weren't laughing with me, Sabrina. They were laughing at me. There's a difference." "Oh, lighten up. Nobody likes the boring, sensitive guy at a party. I'm just trying to make you more memorable." Memorable, like being the human equivalent of a participation trophy, is something to aspire to. Like being remembered as that guy whose wife makes fun of him is a legitimate social strategy. "I don't want to be memorable for being the butt of your jokes," I say, gripping the steering wheel harder than necessary. "I want to be memorable for being, I don't know, interesting, funny, smart, something other than your personal comedy prop." She's already scrolling through her phone, probably uploading pictures from the party with captions about how adorable her husband is. "Marcus, you're overthinking this. It's just harmless fun. Everyone knows I love you." Harmless fun. That phrase is going to haunt me for years, I can already tell. Right up there with "learn to take a joke" in the Marcus Humiliation Hall of Fame. That night, lying in bed while Sabrina sleeps peacefully next to me, completely unbothered by the evening's events, I have another one of those crystal clear moments of realization. She doesn't see me as her partner or her equal. I'm her opening act, her warm-up comedian, the guy who gets the crowd loose before the real show starts. And the real kicker? She genuinely believes she's doing me a favor. If there's one universal rule in marriage, it's this: you don't mess with your spouse's career. You can embarrass them at family barbecues, make jokes about their hobbies, even mock their choice in breakfast cereal, but their job, their professional reputation, that's sacred ground. That's the one place where adults are supposed to act like, well, adults. Sabrina missed that memo entirely. It was our company's annual dinner. You know, one of those mandatory, fun events where everyone pretends to enjoy rubber chicken and small talk, while secretly calculating how early they can leave without offending the boss. Hartwell and Associates goes all out for these things. Fancy hotel ballroom, open bar, speeches about synergy and team building. The kind of corporate shindig where careers can actually be made or broken depending on who you impress and who you accidentally insult. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks, which probably makes me sound like the world's biggest loser, but hear me out. This was my chance to finally make a good impression on Mr. Caldwell and the senior partners. I'd been busting my ass on the Morrison account for months, putting in overtime, double-checking everything, basically living and breathing quarterly reports. The presentation I'd given the week before had gone really well. Even got a nice work from Caldwell himself, which in corporate speak is basically a standing ovation. So yeah, I was feeling optimistic. Dangerous territory for a guy like me. I spent an hour getting ready, which for me is like preparing for the Olympics. Good suit, lucky tie, cologne but not too much, the whole 9 yards. Sabrina looked gorgeous. She always does at these things. in this black dress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. For a brief, shining moment, walking into that ballroom, I thought we actually looked like a power couple. Marcus and Sabrina Jenkins, taking on the corporate world together. The evening started perfectly. I introduced Sabrina to my colleagues, made decent small talk about market trends and client retention, even managed to laugh at Mr. Peterson's terrible golf jokes without visibly cringing. Sabrina was being charming, the good kind of charming, where she actually listened to people and asked thoughtful questions instead of setting up punchlines. We found our table, which thankfully was right in the middle of everything. Not stuck in Siberia with the interns and plus ones, but close enough to the partners' table that I could actually participate in conversations that mattered. I was sitting next to Janet from HR, across from Tom's wife Linda, and best of all, just 2 seats down from Mr. Caldwell himself. The salad course went fine. The main course was smooth sailing. People were asking about my work on the Morrison account, nodding approvingly when I explained my approach to their budget restructuring. I was actually feeling like a contributing member of the team instead of just that quiet guy from the 3rd floor who does taxes. Then came dessert, and with it, the moment my professional life imploded. Mr. Caldwell was telling the table about some new regulatory changes coming down the pipeline, really technical stuff that most spouses would politely nod through while mentally planning their grocery list. But it was fascinating to me. This was the kind of inside information that could actually help me serve clients better. I was hanging on every word, probably looking like an eager puppy, but I didn't care. That's when Sabrina decided the conversation needed some spicing up. "Oh, you should have seen Marcus preparing for his presentation last week," she announced, her voice cutting through the table's quiet focus like a chainsaw through silk. "He practiced his 5-minute speech for 3 whole days." The table turned toward us, and I felt that familiar sinking sensation in my stomach. But surely she wasn't going to do this here. Not at my work dinner. Not in front of my boss. "He even made note cards," she continued, smiling sweetly like she was sharing a cute story about our pet goldfish. Little index cards with bullet points. It was absolutely adorable. The silence stretched for exactly 3 seconds. I counted before the polite laughter started. Not the belly laughs from family parties, but those tight, awkward chuckles people make when they don't know if they should be laughing or calling security. Mr. Caldwell's smile looked like it had been stapled on. Janet from HR was suddenly very interested in her tiramisu. "Well," Mr. Caldwell said after what felt like 17 years, "preparation is important in our line of work." He was trying to save me. My boss, the guy who signs my paychecks and controls my career trajectory, was actually trying to salvage my dignity after my own wife torpedoed it at a company function. The secondhand embarrassment was so thick you could cut it with a butter knife. But Sabrina wasn't done. Oh no, she was just getting warmed up. I kept telling him it was just 5 minutes. "But you know Marcus, he has to be thorough about everything. He probably would have made a PowerPoint if they'd let him." More awkward laughter. Tom coughed into his wine glass. Linda was texting under the table, probably updating her husband about the train wreck happening 2 seats over. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of professional politeness and personal humiliation. People made small talk around me like I was a piece of furniture. Mr. Caldwell moved on to discussing the Peterson account with Janet, effectively excluding me from the conversation I'd been part of minutes earlier. By the time we were heading to the coat check, I could practically feel my career ambitions deflating like a punctured balloon. The drive home was dead silent except for the radio playing some generic pop song that perfectly matched my mood, bland, forgettable, and slightly painful. I white-knuckled the steering wheel so hard I was surprised it didn't snap in half. "That was a nice evening," Sabrina said as we pulled into our driveway, like she hadn't just nuked my professional reputation with a smile and a dinner mint. I didn't respond. What was the point? Explaining that she'd just made me look like an incompetent amateur in front of the people who control my paycheck? Telling her that 3 days of preparation shows dedication, not incompetence? That note cards are a sign of professionalism, not childishness? Instead, I sat in my car in our driveway, engine off, staring at our garage door, and thought about something I'd never seriously considered before: revenge. Not the dramatic, movie villain kind of revenge. Just balance. Justice. A little taste of her own medicine. If jokes at your spouse's expense were really just harmless fun, then maybe it was time for me to start having some fun too. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I discovered it's actually pretty satisfying served hot with a side of scrambled eggs that could double as playground equipment. The morning after the company dinner disaster, I woke up with the kind of clarity that usually only comes after 3 cups of coffee and a near-death experience. Sabrina was already downstairs, clattering around the kitchen like a one-woman percussion section, probably making her famous breakfast that generally resembled food if you squinted and used your imagination. I shuffled downstairs in my bathrobe, mentally preparing for another day of being Marcus the reliable, Marcus the spreadsheet guy, Marcus the human doormat. But something was different this morning. Maybe it was the memory of Mr. Caldwell's pity smile. Maybe it was the way Tom had avoided eye contact for the rest of the evening. Or maybe I just finally reached that magical point where a man's dignity starts fighting back. Morning, sunshine, Sabrina chirped, sliding a plate of what she optimistically called scrambled eggs across the counter. I stared down at these yellow rubber chunks that looked like they'd been cooked with a blowtorch and a prayer. Seriously, these things had the consistency of pencil erasers and about as much flavor as cardboard that had been left in the rain. In the old days, like yesterday, I would have choked them down with a smile and maybe mentioned that they were different or interesting. I was the supportive husband who didn't criticize, didn't complain, didn't make waves. I was Switzerland with a mortgage and a 401k. But this morning, I looked at those sad, rubbery eggs and felt something snap inside me like a wishbone at Thanksgiving. Wow, babe, I said, picking up a piece with my fork and watching it bounce slightly. Breakfast and stress balls in one. These bounce better than my 401k after the last market crash. Sabrina froze, coffee mug halfway to her lips, like I'd just announced I was joining the circus or becoming a professional mime. Her eyes went wide, and for a second, I saw something I'd never seen before, genuine shock. Not the fake surprise she put on when she was setting up a punchline, but real, honest-to-God bewilderment. That's mean, she stammered, setting down her mug with the kind of care usually reserved for handling explosives. I took a bite of the rubber eggs and smiled. Really smiled, not the plastic grin I'd been wearing for months. It's just a joke, honey. Don't be so sensitive. The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a house fire. I could practically see them sinking in, letter by letter, as she realized I'd just used her own greatest hits against her. Her face went through this fascinating color change, pale to pink to red, like a mood ring having an identity crisis. She didn't say anything else during breakfast, just pushed her own eggs around her plate like she was trying to solve a puzzle. I finished mine with theatrical enthusiasm, complimenting the unique texture and wondering aloud if she'd discovered some revolutionary new cooking technique. That evening, right on schedule, the cavalry arrived. Sabrina's friends showed up for their weekly wine and gossip session, also known as let's discuss how much our husbands annoy us while drinking overpriced Pinot Grigio. Usually, I made myself scarce during these gatherings, hiding upstairs with Netflix and noise-canceling headphones like some kind of suburban hermit. Tonight, I decided to stick around. Be social. Participate in the conversation. Show interest in my wife's career. They were all clustered around our living room. Sabrina, Lydia with her hyena laugh, and Meredith from her yoga class, who always talked like she was narrating a meditation video. Sabrina was in full bragging mode, describing her latest project at the marketing firm where she worked. So I've been developing this entire campaign for Henderson Industries, she was saying, gesturing with her wine glass like a conductor with a baton. 3 weeks of market research, focus groups, demographic analysis, the works. We're talking about a complete brand refresh. Lydia nodded appreciatively. That sounds amazing. What's the concept? Sabrina's chest puffed out with pride. Well, it's all about sophisticated minimalism. Clean lines, elegant simplicity, that kind of elevated aesthetic that really speaks to their target demographic. I'd been listening from the kitchen, pretending to load the dishwasher while actually eavesdropping like a suburban spy. This was my moment. My grand entrance into the world of harmless fun and playful teasing. Oh yeah, I chimed in, wandering into the living room with a beer and my most innocent expression. She spent 3 weeks deciding between 2 shades of beige. Revolutionary stuff, really. The room went quiet except for the sound of Meredith's wine glass hitting the coffee table a little too hard. I kept going, because apparently I discovered my inner stand-up comedian and he was hungry for applause. The beige community is absolutely thriving thanks to her groundbreaking work. I mean, who knew there were so many different ways to say bland but expensive? Sabrina's face was now the color of a fire engine, which, ironically, was way more colorful than her entire marketing campaign. Lydia's signature laugh died in her throat like a car running out of gas. Meredith was suddenly very interested in studying the pattern on our throw pillows. "Marcus," Sabrina said through gritted teeth, "can I talk to you in the kitchen for a second?" "Sure thing, babe. Let me just finish explaining how you spent an entire afternoon debating whether warm sand or desert whisper better captured the essence of corporate mediocrity." The kitchen conversation was intense. Sabrina hissed at me like an angry cat, demanding to know what had gotten into me, why I was being so cruel, how I could embarrass her in front of her friends. The irony was so thick I could have spread it on toast and served it for dinner. "I'm just being fun," I said, borrowing her favorite deflection. "Lighten up. You always say nobody likes the boring, sensitive guy at parties." For the first time in our entire relationship, Sabrina didn't have a comeback. She just stood there, opening and closing her mouth like a fish gasping for air, while her friends pretended not to hear us through the paper-thin walls of our cookie-cutter house. Score: Marcus 1, Sabrina 0. And honestly, it felt pretty damn good. You know how drug dealers always say the first hit is free? Well, turns out revenge works the same way. That little taste of sweet justice with the beige campaign comment had me hooked like a suburban dad on fantasy football. I was officially addicted to the look of shock on Sabrina's face when her own medicine came back to bite her. 1 week later, we're driving to dinner at her parents' house. The monthly ritual where I get to sit through 2 hours of polite interrogation about my career prospects while pretending to enjoy Diane's famous pot roast that tastes like it was seasoned with disappointment and regret. Normally, these dinners are exercises in social endurance, like dental surgery, but with more small talk about property values. But today was different. Today I had ammunition. See, about an hour before we left, Sabrina had nearly turned us into a highway statistic because she absolutely had to respond to some meme her college roommate had posted. We're cruising down the 405, traffic moving at a decent clip for once, when her phone buzzes with that specific notification sound that apparently overrides all basic survival instincts. "Oh my God, you have to see this," she says, grabbing her phone while doing 65 in the middle lane. Next thing I know, we're playing chicken with the back end of a Toyota Camry because my wife's thumbs are apparently more important than our continued existence. "Sabrina," I yelled, grabbing the wheel as she swerved back into our lane at the last possible second. "What the hell?" "Relax. I had it under control," she says, still looking at her phone. "Besides, it was just a quick peek." "You're being dramatic." "Dramatic. Right. Because nearly rear-ending someone while texting about cat videos is totally reasonable adult behavior. So when we walk into Bob and Diane's house, all beige walls and family photos arranged with military precision, I'm still running on that adrenaline cocktail of terror and irritation. Plus, I've got this new secret weapon, the ability to turn Sabrina's own tactics against her. Diane greets us at the door wearing her signature passive-aggressive smile and an apron that says "World's Greatest Mom" in Comic Sans font, which should probably be considered a war crime. Bob's in his usual spot on the recliner, watching some Discovery Channel show about people who build boats in their backyards, because apparently that's peak entertainment when you're 62 and own 3 different types of leaf blowers. "Marcus." "Sabrina." Diane chirps, air kissing us like we're visiting royalty instead of the monthly obligation. Come in, come in. Dinner's almost ready. I made your favorite pot roast, Marcus." "It's not my favorite. It's never been my favorite. But I learned years ago that correcting Diane about anything is like trying to teach quantum physics to a golden retriever. Theoretically possible, but ultimately futile." We settle into the living room for the pre-dinner interrogation session, also known as, "How's work going, and when are you giving us grandchildren?" Sabrina launches into her usual spiel about the marketing world, dropping buzzwords like synergy and brand optimization, while I nod along like a dashboard bobblehead. That's when Bob asks about my job, because even though I've been married to his daughter for 4 years, he still seems genuinely surprised that I have actual employment. "Still doing the accounting thing?" he asks, like I might have spontaneously switched careers between last month and now. "Yep, still crunching numbers," I reply, because that's the script we follow at these dinners. Actually just finished a big presentation for. Oh, you should have seen him preparing for that, Sabrina interrupts, and I can practically see the setup coming like a freight train with a broken whistle. He practiced in front of the bathroom mirror for 3 days. I kept telling him it was just 5 minutes. But you know Marcus. He's so thorough. In the old days, this would have been my cue to laugh along and make some self-deprecating comment about being overprepared. But the new Marcus, the Marcus who discovered the intoxicating power of giving someone a taste of their own medicine, had other plans. We moved to the dining room, where Diane has set the table with her good china and approximately 17 different serving dishes for what is essentially meat, potatoes, and vegetables that have been boiled into submission. The pot roast looks like it was cooked sometime last Tuesday and has been slowly dying ever since. Everyone's getting settled, passing around the rolls, and making small talk about the weather when Bob mentions something about crazy drivers these days. Oh, speaking of crazy drivers, I say, cutting into my pot roast with the enthusiasm of someone performing surgery. You should ride with your daughter sometime. She's like a one-woman demolition derby. Sabrina freezes with her fork halfway to her mouth. Diane looks up from her mashed potatoes with genuine interest. Bob actually turns away from his mental calculation of how much gravy he can consume without giving himself a heart attack. Earlier today, I continue, really hitting my stride now. She nearly introduced us to the back of a Toyota because she absolutely had to respond to a meme. We're talking full-speed highway near-miss because someone posted a picture of a cat wearing sunglasses. Diane gasps like I just announced we were joining a cult. Bob makes that whistling sound through his teeth that means he's genuinely concerned about our life choices. It wasn't that close, Sabrina protests, but her voice has that high-pitched quality it gets when she's cornered. Honey, I could read the Camry driver's license plate. I say with a smile so sweet it could cause diabetes. And their facial expression, which, for the record, was pure terror. Marcus is exaggerating, Sabrina says, shooting me a look that could melt steel. I'm a perfectly safe driver. Oh, absolutely. I agree, taking another bite of Diane's cardboard pot roast. As long as you define safe, as hasn't actually killed us yet. She's a real multitasker, texting, driving, and giving me premature gray hair all at the same time. Bob chuckles nervously, the kind of laugh people make when they're not sure if they should call the police or a marriage counselor. Diane looks like she's seriously considering hiring a full-time driver for her daughter. The rest of dinner passes in relative quiet, with Sabrina pushing food around her plate and shooting me death glares every time her parents aren't looking. When she excuses herself to the bathroom, Diane leans over and whispers, maybe she should take a defensive driving course, dear. For the first time in 4 years of monthly dinners, I actually enjoyed the pot roast. By now, I was getting comfortable in my new role as the guy who fights back. It's amazing how quickly you can go from being a human punching bag to someone who actually throws a few punches of their own. And let me tell you, after years of taking it on the chin, I was discovering I had a pretty decent right hook when it came to verbal sparring. The opportunity for my magnum opus came courtesy of Sabrina's company cocktail party. Now, this wasn't just any work function. This was the kind of high-stakes corporate schmoozing where careers get made, deals get struck, and reputations get built or destroyed faster than you can say quarterly projections. Think of it as the corporate Olympics, except instead of medals, people compete for promotions and corner offices. Sabrina worked for Morrison & Associates, one of those boutique marketing firms that charges astronomical fees to tell companies their logos should be more authentic and their color schemes need to better reflect their brand DNA. It's the kind of place where everyone has a title like Senior Vice President of Creative Synergy and speaks exclusively in buzzwords that would make a normal person's brain melt. For weeks leading up to this party, Sabrina had been stress shopping like it was an Olympic sport. She'd bought 3 different dresses, returned 2, bought another one, changed her mind, and finally settled on something that probably cost more than my monthly student loan payment. This was her big chance to impress Gloria Hendricks, the company's managing partner, and potentially land that promotion she'd been chasing for months. I should have been supportive. A good husband would have played the role of the charming, presentable spouse who makes pleasant small talk and doesn't embarrass anyone. But apparently, good husband Marcus had left the building, and in his place was someone who'd been taking detailed notes on exactly how his wife operated at these things. We arrived at the Westin downtown, all marble floors and crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than my car. The ballroom was packed with the kind of people who use ideate as a verb and think circle back is sophisticated business language. Everyone was dressed to kill, networking like their lives depended on it, which in the corporate world, they basically do. Sabrina immediately went into power mode, working the room like a seasoned politician. She had this whole routine down. The strategic positioning near the bar where important people congregated, the carefully timed entrances into conversations, the way she'd laugh at jokes that weren't actually funny but were told by people who controlled budgets. I watched her in action for about 20 minutes, nursing a whiskey and observing her technique like a nature documentary narrator studying predators in their natural habitat. She was good. I had to give her credit. Really good. The way she could seamlessly insert herself into conversations, turn casual chat into business discussions, and make everyone feel like they were the most interesting person in the room. It was almost artistic. That's when she made her first mistake. She spotted Gloria Hendricks near the appetizer table and decided it was time for introductions. "Gloria," Sabrina called out, gliding over with that practiced smile that could sell ice to penguins. "I'd love you to meet my husband, Marcus." Gloria turned, and I found myself face to face with a woman who looked like she could negotiate peace treaties before breakfast and still have time to restructure a Fortune 500 company by lunch. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, the kind of handshake that could crush walnuts. "Marcus," Gloria said, "Sabrina's told me so much about you. You're in finance, right?" "Accounting, actually," I replied, because accuracy matters in my line of work. That's when Sabrina decided to spice things up, because apparently, meeting her boss wasn't stressful enough without adding a side of public humiliation. "Oh, Gloria, you should see Marcus's impression of you," Sabrina said with that mischievous sparkle in her eye that I'd learned to fear more than tax audits. "He does this hilarious bit about corporate speak. Go on, Marcus, show her the synergy speech with the hand gestures." Time slowed down. I could see Gloria's smile tightening like a cable under stress, could practically watch her mental filing system reorganizing to put Sabrina in the questionable judgment category. This was it. My wife had just asked me to mock her boss to her boss's face at a company function. In the old days, I would have stammered out an excuse, changed the subject, maybe died a little inside while trying to salvage the situation. But new Marcus? New Marcus smiled like a shark who'd just spotted a swimmer with a paper cut. "Oh, that impression," I said, my voice dripping with mock enthusiasm. "You know, Sabrina does the best version of it actually. She spent 4 hours practicing it in front of the mirror. The hand gestures are really what sell it. Isn't that right, honey?" Sabrina's face went from confident to confused to horrified in about 3 seconds flat. Gloria's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline like they were trying to escape. The awkwardness. "For hours?" Gloria asked, and I could hear the temperature drop about 20 degrees. "Oh yeah," I continued, because apparently I was committed to this kamikaze mission now. "She was really dedicated to getting your mannerisms just right. The way you say, let's leverage our core competencies while doing that little hand circle thing. Chef's kiss. Academy Award material." Gloria's smile had now progressed beyond stiff and into the realm of actively hostile. Sabrina looked like she wanted to melt into the marble floor. "Well," Gloria said, her voice carrying the kind of chill usually reserved for Arctic tundra, "that's interesting. Sabrina, perhaps we should discuss your attention to detail in my office next week." She walked away, leaving Sabrina standing there like a statue of pure mortification. The party continued around us, but something fundamental had shifted. Where before Sabrina had been confidently working the room, now she was moving through conversations like someone walking through a minefield. Every laugh seemed forced, every smile looked painful. About an hour later, I spotted her in the ladies' room hallway, dabbing at her eyes with a cocktail napkin. Her carefully applied makeup was smudged, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely shaken. I walked over, handed her my pocket square, and said the words that had become my new favorite phrase. "What's wrong, honey? I was just being fun. Don't be so sensitive." She looked at me like I was a stranger, like she was seeing me clearly for the first time in years. "This is what you wanted," I added, taking a sip of my drink. "Look at me. Fun at parties. You'd think after the cocktail party nuclear meltdown, Sabrina might have taken a step back to reflect on her life choices. Maybe done some soul-searching about the whole publicly mocking your spouse thing. Perhaps even considered the radical notion that what goes around comes around with interest. You'd be wrong. Instead of learning from the experience, she doubled down like a gambler on a losing streak who's convinced the next hand will turn everything around. The morning after her professional humiliation, I woke up to the sound of her on the phone with her mother, voice pitched high enough to shatter crystal. "Mom, Marcus is being cruel," she was saying, pacing around our bedroom like a caged animal. "He embarrassed me in front of my boss. My boss, Mom. Do you know what this could do to my career?" I lay there pretending to be asleep, listening to her paint herself as the victim in this whole scenario. According to Sabrina's version of events, I had spontaneously turned into some kind of monster who attacked innocent people for no reason. There was no mention of years of public humiliation, no acknowledgement of the pattern she'd established, no recognition that maybe, just maybe, she'd been dishing out exactly what she was now crying about receiving. "He's becoming vindictive," she continued, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Vindictive? I was giving her a master class in her own behavior, but apparently that made me the bad guy. The phone calls continued throughout the day. Sabrina worked through her entire contact list like she was conducting a political campaign, spinning the story to anyone who would listen. Her sister Camille got the full sob story over lunch. Her college roommate received a 40-minute recap via FaceTime. Even her yoga instructor heard about my apparent transformation into the husband from hell. But the real jackpot came 3 days later, courtesy of modern technology and my wife's complete inability to operate basic smartphone functions. I was at work, reviewing quarterly reports and trying to pretend my marriage wasn't imploding in real time, when my phone buzzed with a text notification. The message was from Sabrina, which was weird because she usually called if she needed something during the day. I opened it expecting some mundane question about dinner plans or whether I'd remembered to pay the electric bill. Instead, I found myself staring at what was clearly meant to be a group chat between Sabrina, Lydia, and her sister Camille. Except somehow, whether through divine intervention, karma, or just good old-fashioned technological incompetence, she'd accidentally added me to their little support group session. The conversation was already in progress, and reading it was like watching a car accident in slow motion. You know it's going to be horrible, but you can't look away. "Lydia, I still can't believe what he did at your work thing. That's like relationship sabotage 101. Camille, right? Like, there's being upset about something, and then there's actively trying to destroy your career. That's psycho behavior." "Sabrina, I know. And the worst part is he's acting like I deserve it somehow. Like I did something to provoke this." My stomach was already sinking, but I kept reading because apparently I'm a glutton for punishment. "Lydia, he's definitely changed. Remember when he used to just take your jokes and laugh along? He was so easygoing." "Camille, yeah, he used to be safe. Boring, but safe. Now he's just mean and boring." "Sabrina, exactly. I miss the old Marcus. He was predictable, reliable." And then came the line that hit me like a freight train carrying a cargo of broken dreams. "Sabrina, honestly, Marcus has always just been a placeholder. Reliable, boring, safe, but not someone you actually build a life with." I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I stared at my phone screen, reading that sentence over and over until the words burned themselves into my retinas. A placeholder. 3.5 years of marriage, and I was a placeholder. Not a partner, not a lover, not even a real person, just a convenient stand-in until something better came along. The conversation continued, but I couldn't focus on the words anymore. Everything was just white noise underneath the thunderous revelation that my wife saw me as temporary. A rental husband. The relationship equivalent of a starter apartment. Good enough for now, but definitely not the forever home. My hands were shaking as I screenshotted the entire conversation. Every message, every casual dismissal of our marriage, every brutal assessment of my worth as a human being. The evidence of what she really thought about me, about us, about the life we'd supposedly been building together. Then I did something I'd never done before in our entire relationship. I got angry. Not hurt feelings angry or wounded pride angry, but white-hot, righteous fury angry. The kind of anger that burns clean and gives you perfect clarity about what needs to be done. I opened a new text message, attached the screenshots, and typed out a single line. "Now I understand. I wasn't your husband. I was your entertainment. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then watched as the three dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. She was frantically trying to figure out how to explain this away, how to spin it into something that wasn't exactly what it looked like. My phone rang within 30 seconds. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Voicemail again. By the time I left the office that evening, I had 17 missed calls and about 40 text messages ranging from desperate apologies to angry accusations to bewildered questions about how I'd even seen the conversation in the first place. I didn't respond to any of them. What was the point? She'd told me everything I needed to know, and she'd done it with the brutal honesty that only comes when you think the other person isn't listening. That night, I sat in my car in our driveway for 20 minutes before going inside, staring at our house and trying to figure out when it had stopped feeling like home and started feeling like a stage set for a play I didn't want to be in anymore. When I finally walked through the front door, Sabrina was waiting in the living room like a defendant at sentencing. Her eyes were red from crying, her hair was a mess, and she looked smaller somehow, like she'd been deflated. "Marcus," she started. "I can explain." "No," I said, and my voice sounded different even to me. Calmer, cleaner. "You already explained everything perfectly. I just wasn't supposed to hear it." For the first time in our entire relationship, Sabrina was completely speechless. And for the first time in years, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. The thing about nuclear bombs is that they don't just destroy the target. They leave radioactive fallout that poisons everything for miles around. My little screenshot gift to Sabrina had the same effect on our marriage, except instead of radiation, we were dealing with the toxic waste of 3 years' worth of accumulated lies and resentment. For 2 days after the group chat revelation, we existed in the same house like hostile diplomats from warring nations. Sabrina tried every approach in the book: tears, anger, bargaining, more tears, but I'd moved past the point where her emotional theater could reach me. When someone tells you exactly what they think of you and what they believe is a private conversation, it's like seeing behind the curtain. Once you know the wizard is just a sad little man pulling levers, you can't unknow it. She kept trying to minimize it, of course. It wasn't what it sounded like. I was just venting. You know how I get when I'm upset. But here's the thing about accidentally telling the truth. It's usually more honest than anything you say on purpose. The morning of day 3, Sabrina made her grand gesture. She showed up at my office during lunch with a bag from that expensive deli downtown, the kind of peace offering that costs $40 and comes with artisanal everything. I was in the break room microwaving leftover pizza when Janet from HR came over with this weird expression on her face. "Marcus," she said, lowering her voice like she was about to tell me someone had died. "Your wife is here." With lunch. I found Sabrina in the lobby, sitting on one of those uncomfortable modern chairs that look like geometric art projects, holding her designer handbag like a shield. She'd done her hair and makeup like she was going to a job interview, which in a way, I guess she was. This was her audition for the role of wife who deserves a second chance. "Hi," she said, standing up so fast she nearly knocked over her chair. "I brought lunch. Your favorite. From Romano's." It wasn't my favorite, but I didn't bother correcting her. We found an empty conference room, and she laid out the spread like she was setting up for a romantic picnic instead of attempting damage control after calling her husband a placeholder. "Marcus," she started, but I held up a hand. "Before you say anything," I said, unwrapping what appeared to be a sandwich that cost more than some people's hourly wage, "I want you to know that Jared from accounting thinks you're hilarious." Her face went pale. "What?" "This morning, he came up to me and said, 'Hey, comedian, we loved your bit about Marcus's note cards at the company dinner. Apparently, the story of your little roast session has been making the rounds. People think it's funny that my wife mocks me in public.'" Sabrina looked like she'd been slapped. I didn't know people were talking about it." "Of course you didn't. Because when you're the one holding the microphone, you don't usually pay attention to how the audience actually feels." I took a bite of the overpriced sandwich. "This is good, by the way. Thanks for bringing it." The unexpected pleasantry seemed to throw her off balance. She'd probably prepared for anger, for accusations, for the kind of dramatic confrontation you see in movies. She wasn't ready for politeness. "I want to fix this," she said, her voice small. "I know I messed up, but I want to fix it." "Which part?" "The years of public humiliation, or getting caught telling your friends that I'm basically a rental husband. It wasn't like that, Sabrina. I set down the sandwich and looked at her directly. You call me a placeholder. In what universe is that not exactly like that? She started crying then, which was probably strategy number 4 in her playbook. Real tears, not the crocodile variety, which almost made it worse. It's hard to stay angry at someone who's genuinely falling apart, even when they've earned every bit of that falling apart. I didn't mean it, she sobbed. I was upset, and I was talking to my sister, and I said things I didn't mean. You know how I get when I'm emotional. Actually, I think you meant every word. That's why it hurts so much to read it. It was honest in a way you've never been with me directly. She reached across the table like she wanted to take my hand, then thought better of it. I'll stop making jokes. I promise. I'll never embarrass you again. It's not about the jokes anymore, Sabrina. It's about respect. It's about the fact that you've spent 3 years treating me like a supporting character in your life instead of your actual partner. That's not true. You literally called me boring and safe to your friends. You said I was a placeholder. How is that not treating me like a supporting character? She didn't have an answer for that, so she tried a different approach. We can go to counseling. We can work on this. Please, Marcus, I don't want to lose you. That evening, I came home to find her in the living room surrounded by tissues like the aftermath of a paper snowstorm. She'd clearly been crying for hours, and our coffee table was covered with self-help books she'd apparently bought in bulk. How to Save Your Marriage. Communication in Relationships. Rebuilding Trust After Betrayal. It looked like the clearance section of the psychology department at Barnes & Noble. I've been thinking, she said, not looking up from the book she was pretending to read. About what you said. About respect. You're right. I haven't been respectful. I sat down across from her, noting how she'd positioned herself in the most pathetic pose possible. No, you haven't. I'll change. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever it takes. Sabrina, you can't therapy your way out of fundamentally not respecting your spouse. This isn't a communication problem or a trust issue. This is a character problem. She looked up then, and I could see genuine fear in her eyes. Not fear of being alone or fear of starting over, but fear of accountability. Fear of having to face the reality of who she'd been in this relationship. So what are you saying? She whispered. I looked around our living room. At the pictures of us at various stages of our relationship, at the furniture we'd picked out together, at all the accumulated stuff of a shared life, and felt nothing. No sadness, no nostalgia, no regret. Just the kind of clarity that comes when you finally stop lying to yourself. I'm saying that if you want to stay married to me, you need to move out. What? Move out. Figure out who you are when you're not performing for an audience. Figure out what you actually want instead of what you think you're supposed to want. And figure out whether you can actually respect the person you married. She stared at me like I'd suggested we relocate to Mars. That doesn't make sense. If we're trying to fix our marriage, why would I move out? Because right now, you don't want to fix our marriage. You want to fix the consequences of our marriage being broken. There's a difference. The crying started again, harder this time, but I didn't move to comfort her. Those days were over. They say that breaking up is hard to do, but nobody prepared me for the sheer theatrical production that is a narcissist realizing they're about to lose their favorite prop. What followed my move-out ultimatum was like watching someone cycle through the 5 stages of grief, except each stage came with its own social media campaign and a supporting cast of enablers. Stage 1, Denial. This lasted exactly 48 hours and involved Sabrina acting like our conversation in the living room had never happened. She'd text me about dinner plans like we were still playing house. Want Chinese tonight? Miss you, Red Heart, followed by picking up wine on the way home, as if I hadn't just told her our marriage was on life support and she needed to find somewhere else to live. I'd come home from work to find her cooking elaborate meals, wearing the kind of outfits she usually reserved for date nights we hadn't had in months. She'd greet me at the door like a 1950s housewife who'd taken too many happy pills, talking about her day and asking about mine, as if we hadn't reached the point where politeness felt like sandpaper on an open wound. How was your day, honey? She'd chirp, while I stood in our entryway wondering if I'd accidentally walked into some alternate universe where the last week hadn't happened. We need to talk about you finding a place, I'd say, and she'd laugh like I'd made a joke. Oh, Marcus, you're being dramatic. Things are fine. Look, I made your favorite pasta. It wasn't my favorite pasta, But pointing that out seemed beside the point when she was clearly operating in a reality where basic cause and effect didn't apply. Stage 2. Anger. This hit like a Category 5 hurricane around day 3, when it finally sank in that I wasn't going to pretend everything was normal just because she'd decided to rewrite recent history. The texts went from sweet to psychotic in record time. "You're a psycho" arrived at 2:47 a.m., followed by "I wasted the best years of my life on you" at 3:15 a.m., and then a rapid-fire series of messages that read like a greatest hits album of relationship accusations. Apparently, I was emotionally unavailable, financially controlling, socially awkward, and personally responsible for her career problems, her trust issues, and probably climate change while we were at it. My personal favorite was, "You manipulated me into thinking I was the problem when you were the toxic one all along." The irony was so thick you could have used it to insulate a house, but self-awareness had never been Sabrina's strong suit. She also started calling at all hours, leaving voicemails that ranged from tearful apologies to screaming accusations, sometimes within the same message. I stopped listening to them after she left one that was just heavy breathing and what sounded like ugly crying for 4 straight minutes. Stage 3. Bargaining. This phase came with a side of public relations management that would have impressed a political campaign. Suddenly, Sabrina was willing to do anything, change everything, become a completely different person if only I'd take her back. "I'll go to therapy," she announced during one of her surprise visits to my office, apparently having forgotten that showing up at someone's workplace uninvited is generally frowned upon by both employers and restraining order judges. "I'll stop making jokes completely. I'll become serious. I'll take a vow of comedic silence if that's what you want." She'd researched marriage counselors, bought more self-help books, and even signed up for some online course about building healthy relationship dynamics. The irony of someone who'd spent years treating her husband like a comedy prop suddenly becoming an expert on healthy relationships wasn't lost on me, but I kept that observation to myself. "I'll apologize publicly," she offered during another ambush conversation. "I'll tell everyone at the next party that I was wrong, that you're amazing, that I don't deserve you." "Sabrina," I said, "you can't fix years of disrespect with a few weeks of performance art." Stage 4. Depression. This was arguably the most exhausting phase, because it came with a full social media campaign designed to make me look like the villain in our breakup story. Her Instagram became a highlight reel of inspirational quotes about betrayal, strength, and rising above toxic relationships. Sometimes the person you'd take a bullet for is the one pulling the trigger appeared over a sunset photo that had definitely been taken during our anniversary trip last year. The comments section filled up with heart emojis and "you deserve better" girl responses from people who only knew her version of events. My personal favorite was a quote about red flags that said, "When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time." The complete lack of self-awareness was so profound, it almost achieved a kind of Zen-like purity. She also started posting cryptic messages about emotional abuse and gaslighting, which was rich considering she'd spent our entire relationship convincing me that my completely reasonable reactions to public humiliation were signs of being too sensitive. But here's the thing about truth. It has a way of leaking out around the edges of even the most carefully constructed narrative. Slowly, people started talking. Not the people in her immediate circle, who were either too loyal or too invested in the drama to see clearly, but the peripheral folks who'd been watching our dynamic at parties for years. Tom from my office mentioned that his wife Linda had always felt uncomfortable watching Sabrina's comedy routines at company functions. Linda said it reminded her of her first marriage, he told me over coffee. Her ex used to do that same thing, turn her into entertainment for other people. Even Lydia's boyfriend, who'd been subjected to years of Sabrina's stories about my supposed quirks and failings, started making comments about how he'd always thought the jokes seemed mean-spirited. "I mean, everyone's got weird habits," he told someone at a party, according to the social network Grapevine. "But broadcasting your spouse's business for laughs? That's not normal." The cracks in Sabrina's victim narrative started showing when people realized they'd been watching a pattern of behavior, not a sudden personality change on my part. When you spend years training people to see your spouse as a punchline, it's hard to suddenly rebrand them as the villain when they finally stop laughing. Stage 5. Acceptance. This one never actually arrived. Instead, Sabrina seemed to get stuck in a loop between anger and bargaining, with occasional detours into denial when she'd convinced herself that this was all just a phase I was going through. What did arrive was the truth, seeping out like water through a cracked foundation until the whole structure of her carefully maintained image started to crumble. And me? I just kept living my life, discovering what it felt like to exist without a constant background soundtrack of mockery and judgment. It was surprisingly peaceful. 6 months later, I was sitting in a coffee shop downtown, reading the Sunday paper like a civilized human being instead of hiding in my own house to avoid another episode of The Sabrina Show, when I realized something profound. I couldn't remember the last time someone had made fun of me in public. Not because I'd gotten tougher or developed thicker skin, but because I'd finally removed the person whose entire relationship strategy was built on treating me like a walking punchline. It's amazing how quiet life gets when you stop living with someone who thinks mockery is a love language. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks earlier, a surprisingly civil affair considering the drama that led up to it. Sabrina had finally moved out after 2 months of what could generously be called strategic delays, and more accurately described as squatting with emotional manipulation. She'd found a place across town, something modern and expensive that probably cost twice what our mortgage did, because apparently financial responsibility was another one of those boring traits she'd left behind along with her marriage. I kept the house, which felt like winning the lottery and getting struck by lightning at the same time. Walking through rooms that had once echoed with constant commentary about my inadequacies, I found myself actually enjoying the silence. No more helpful observations about my adorable organizational habits. No more theatrical sighs when I wanted to watch something other than reality TV. No more feeling like I needed permission to exist in my own space. The best part? I'd started dating again, and let me tell you, it's remarkable how different relationships can be when both people actually like each other. Her name was Clara, and I'd met her at a work conference where she was presenting on sustainable business practices while I was there for a session on tax code updates. Not exactly a romantic comedy setup, but sometimes the best things happen when you're not trying to impress anyone. Clara was everything Sabrina wasn't. Kind without being fake, funny without being cruel, and absolutely brilliant in a way that made you want to learn more instead of feeling like you needed to defend yourself. She laughed at my jokes because they were actually funny, not because she was setting up a punchline at my expense. Our first real date was at this little Italian place where the waitress accidentally brought us the wrong appetizer. Instead of making it into a story about my social awkwardness or inability to handle basic human interactions, Clara just shrugged and said, "More bruschetta for us." No drama, no performance, no opportunity to turn a minor restaurant mix-up into material for her next social gathering. 3 months in, she asked me to a party at her friend's house, and I actually felt nervous. Not because I was worried about embarrassing myself, but because I was worried about disappointing her. When you've spent years being someone's comic relief, the idea of being someone's actual partner takes some getting used to. "This is Marcus," she said when we walked in, and I braced myself for the inevitable qualifier. "He makes spreadsheets for fun." Her friends laughed, and I waited for the other shoe to drop. For the elaboration about how weird that was, how adorably nerdy, how charmingly obsessive. Instead, Clara smiled and added, "Right? How refreshingly weird. I love it." No punchline. No setup for a bigger joke. Just affection. Genuine affection for something that was actually just a normal part of who I was. I stood there holding my beer, waiting for the mockery that never came, feeling like I'd accidentally wandered into some alternate universe where people could be different without being wrong. That night, driving home, Clara asked me about my ex-wife. Not in a jealous way or a fishing for information way, but with the kind of gentle curiosity that comes from actually caring about someone's history. She thought sarcasm was a personality trait. I told her, which got a genuine laugh that had nothing to do with making me feel small. "Ah," Clara said, "one of those people who confuses being mean with being funny." It was such a simple observation, but it hit me like a revelation. That's exactly what it had been. Meanness masquerading as humor, cruelty dressed up as entertainment. For years, I'd been convinced that my inability to laugh along was a character flaw, that being hurt by constant mockery meant I was too sensitive, too boring, too fundamentally lacking in whatever quality makes someone worthy of respect. But Clara saw it for what it was, not a personality trait, but a character defect. The universe, apparently, has a sense of humor that's way better than Sabrina's ever was. About a month after that conversation, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize at first. When I opened it, I realized it was from one of Sabrina's old phone numbers. She'd been cycling through them like a spy, trying to avoid detection. "Your new girl looks boring too," the message read. Perfect match. I was about to delete it when Clara peeked over my shoulder. We were making dinner together, something that had become a Sunday tradition, and she was reading the ingredients on a pasta box when she caught sight of my screen. "Is that the ex who thought mockery was a love language?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Yikes. Not hurt, not threatened, not interested in engaging with the drama. Just yikes. Like you'd say about someone who cuts in line at the grocery store or doesn't use turn signals. Mildly annoying behavior from someone whose opinion doesn't actually matter. I deleted the message and went back to chopping vegetables, marveling at how different it felt to be with someone who didn't see every interaction as an opportunity for performance art. But the real cherry on top of this whole karmic Sunday came a few weeks later, courtesy of my old friend's social media. Sabrina had been relatively quiet online since the divorce, probably on the advice of whatever therapist she'd started seeing to work through her trust issues and fear of abandonment, issues that, according to her new narrative, were completely unrelated to her habit of treating people like entertainment. Then she started posting pictures with a new guy, Brad, according to the tagged photos. He looked like the kind of person who uses bro, unironically, and owns multiple pairs of white sunglasses. Perfect for someone who needed an audience more than a partner. For about 3 months, her Instagram was full of couple photos and inspirational quotes about finding someone who appreciates your authentic self. Brad seemed to enjoy being her new material, laughing along with her stories and playing the role of supportive boyfriend to her recovering victim act. Then, suddenly, the photos stopped. The quotes got sadder. And eventually, through the gossip network that connects all divorced people in a metropolitan area, I heard the whole story. Turns out, Sabrina had been doing to Brad exactly what she'd done to me, making him the butt of her jokes, turning his quirks into entertainment, treating their relationship like material for her personal comedy show. The only difference was that Brad lasted 3 months instead of 3 years before he figured out that being someone's punchline isn't actually a form of affection. According to Lydia, who heard it from Meredith, who heard it from someone at yoga class, Brad had finally had enough when Sabrina made jokes about his job performance in front of his co-workers at a company happy hour. Sound familiar? The best part? When he broke up with her, he apparently said, "I don't want to date someone who thinks being mean is being funny." Karma, it turns out, doesn't need me to write the punchlines. It delivers them itself, with perfect timing and just the right amount of irony. These days, I wake up every morning in a house that feels like home instead of a stage set. I make my spreadsheets without commentary. I go to parties where people know my name instead of just my function as someone else's prop. And I'm dating someone who thinks my quirks are features, not bugs. Sabrina's probably still out there somewhere, looking for someone new to serve as her audience. But that's not my problem anymore. I've got better things to do than be anyone's opening act.